Yeah. Of course.
Okay.
All set. Good evening. Welcome to the Oregon City Council regular meeting. It is March 28th, 2022. It is 7 p.m. Let's open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Here.
Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Powell?
Here.
Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallenzek?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Here. Also present at tonight's meeting is Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Michael Beasley, Clerk of Courts Tina Evans, or Clerk of Council Tina Evans, Law Director Melissa Papura, Civil Service Director Paul Roman, Chief of Police Brandon Vegan, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Dennis Hartman, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and Building and Zoning Commissioner Jim Gilmore. First order of business tonight, council, would be we have 3 public hearings that we're going to do tonight. And I will open the first public hearing, which is item 65-2022. And this is authorizing a special use permit for parcel 44-38-921 for the property located at 6450 Corduroy Road for the purpose of having 4 horses and 20 chickens on the property in a R1 low-density residential zoning district. And I will open the public hearing at 7:02. Is there anybody that wishes to speak? Oh, okay. Mr. Gilmore, could you give us a little insight into this particular item?
Sure. Thank you, Council President. This was referred by council to the Plan Commission on February 25th for having 4 horses and 20 chickens. The recommendation from the Plan Commission was for approval, and that's why we're here tonight. So that's about it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Mr. Gilmore. Is there anybody that wishes to speak in favor of this particular item? Is there anybody that wishes to speak in opposition of this item? Mr. Graham, please come forward. Please state your name and your address for the record, please.
My name is Noel Graham. I live at 5403 Bayshore Road in Oregon, Ohio. And I'd like to first start out by just saying, I have no problem with the addition of the horse and the chickens. The biggest problem we had was roosters. And as long as there could be a stipulation, and during the zoning or the planning commission, it was stated that that stipulation could be put in, but unfortunately it wasn't when the vote was taken. So that was one of the things that I wanted to have considered. But I have no problem with the extra horse because she already has 3. She's a good neighbor, and the chickens are fine. But as long as there's no roosters, we're okay with that. Do you have any questions for me at all?
Council, any questions for Mr. Graham?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves?
I don't have a question for Mr. Graham, but I know this might sound stupid, but how do you know the difference between a hen and a rooster
Any chicken?
Yes. in the morning?
Thank you, Mr. Graham. The only thing that I would make note of, Mr. Graham, is that, I did watch the Plan Commission meeting, and Ms. Clark did clearly state, though, that she does not intend to have roosters, but I understand that can happen, especially if you purchase your chickens through the mail. But it was clear to me that was not her intention. But thank you. Council, any other questions?
Mr. President?
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, if Ms. Clark does not have any objection, why don't we add that stipulation as an amendment to the special use? If neither party has an objection, or if Ms. Clark doesn't have an objection, then we could always add that as a stipulation or an amendment to the special use.
So, Mr. Wallenczak, your amendment would be that there would be no roosters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Council,
Miss-
any discussion on that?
I would ask Mrs. Clark if she's okay with that. If she's indicated during the plan commission meeting that that would not be an issue, I'll ask her, Ms. Clark, would that be an issue with you if that was added? Yeah. With the, you get chickens, roosters. I mean, I don't live out by you guys, so I don't know, I don't hear that in the morning.
Good idea.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Okay.
I do live out there, and I'll tell you, there's chickens and roosters everywhere out there. You don't know whose is whose. And you're hearing them, not just in the morning, you hear them all throughout the day. So, I mean, if you could not have roosters, that would be great. But if you don't want to sex them, how can you do that? You're going to have to get rid of them after 6 months. Right.
Mr. President, could Ms. Clark,
Mr. Reeves?
I cannot hear Ms. Clark. Could she come to the podium, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Kelly, just really quick, state your name and your address, please.
Kelly Clark, 6450 Corduroy.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No, I just couldn't hear you from back there.
I just said I did not want it in there because I'm not gonna sex my chickens. I'm not gonna worry about whether I got a rooster. I don't want roosters. But if there's one in there, I can't guarantee it's not
Yeah.
gonna be.
You're just not going to intentionally bring a rooster on your
No,
property.
No, I don't intentionally want a rooster, but if it's in there, it would be in there.
Okay, just as an idea, what if we added to that as an amendment that it's no roosters intended?
That means, yeah, I wouldn't even worry about that.
Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even worry about
But
that.
it's in the spirit.
Agrees.
Mr. President, I know this may be a long shot, but what happens if you get 20 chickens and 15 of them are roosters?
I'm not gonna keep 15 roosters. I mean, we're having a fit about roosters. Chickens make noises too. It's just not the roosters that, yes, they crow. But other than that, I mean, we're being quite picky over chickens when I've only asked for a few chickens. So.
As a quick question for you,
Yes.
Kelly. You know, I go to Tractor Supply and they have chickens there, and I think there's another place out there in Woodville Road that also does it.
Yeah.
And they have bins where they say they're guaranteed hens that are already hatched. I mean,
They,
is,
I
is,
mean, that's what I intend on getting is all hens, but I can't guarantee it.
so, I mean, but, I mean, if they have them there, that
It still doesn't matter.
it still doesn't matter?
Nope.
Okay.
It could be mixed.
Okay, because I know they have it mixed up, but they have a couple bins that say
Yeah.
guaranteed hens.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I'm shooting for, but if they're mixed, they're mixed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark.
President,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Drake?
I got a question. Ms. Clark, do you know, and I know nothing about farm animals, do you know, is there a certain age when they do know what they are? Because like Tim said, I've been to Tractor Supply and okay, and
There's not a big difference between them. Size is one thing. It just depends on the breed that you get.
okay. Is there a point in their lifetime other than crowing or chirping in the morning that you can tell whether they're a rooster or a chicken?
I'm sure there's somebody that can.
This is always the most stimulating conversations we've
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, are there any other questions or comments?
Mr. President, I have a question.
Mr. Horniak?
In the SUE application, are the chickens going to be free range all over the property? Or are they kept in a certain area? Okay, and the pen is located where approximately on that parcel? Okay. All right. So is that ranging that from north to south in the property is that about mid-range to the property? Okay. Okay. Would you be opposed to trying to bring that forward if the noise, I'm assuming, is what we're working on? Because there are some across the street, I do believe. Is that an amicable way to kind of resolve that? Mhm.
She knows what that is. She's actually okay with it.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, any other comments or questions? Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to speak on this matter? Mr. Graham?
You know, I think it's a little different. Myers is across the street. Her property kind of, it butts up to the 11 lots that we're gonna have right adjacent to where she lives. The further away the rooster, probably the less noisy it's gonna be. And that's why I feel, you know, it only makes sense. I mean, 7 months, I don't know if you can get 7-month-old chickens, or if there's a way you can find out. There's something here in Modern Farmer that gives you 5 differences between hens and roosters. You know, so there is a way you can have a, you know, a pretty good chance of, you know, maybe differentiating between the two. And, you know, in all fairness, I think that in the right setting, maybe a rooster's proper, but not here. So stipulating that, and I apologize, I didn't hear in there, maybe she said that she couldn't tell the difference, but I couldn't remember her saying that she agreed not to have roosters in that planning commission meeting. But if that's what she said, you know, I would think that, you know, from my standpoint, I prefer not to have the roosters. You know, I just think it would make for a better setting, especially if it was in your backyard. You know, at least the likelihood of it not being a problem or inconvenience would be much better without it. So I would prefer the stipulation if possible.
Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms.
Ms. Clark, how far away is the pen from the property line where the subdivision is, the proposed subdivision? How much? The pond is right here. So, okay, and it's behind the pond? Okay. Okay. So how, and talking feet wise, is it from that, the property line where the development is located? So could there, would you mind, I mean, would a stipulation work as not as so many feet close to the adjoining, if they're gonna be in a pen area? Is that? Well, that way, if it's stipulated that you're not gonna be right up against the property line with your pen, that might serve as a little bit of a buffer to where the noise won't be so bad if they're right up against the property line. Okay, okay. And the other neighbor on the other side doesn't have an issue with you getting chickens? Okay. You're the neighbor on the other side?
I'm a neighbor on the other side. No objection whatsoever.
Okay. Because we're talking about a development with a neighborhood. And the reason why their roosters aren't allowed in R1s is because the houses are so close together and it is pretty noisy. So, right, so that's what I'm saying. If your pen isn't anywhere near that property line, then you're not gonna hear them if they're a certain amount of feet away. Do you know what I'm saying? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Council, any more comments or questions? Hearing none, I would like to close the hearing at 7:16. Council, are there any objections? Meeting will be closed at 7:16, and I will submit item 65, 2022 as ordinance 65, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing a special use permit for parcel 44-38921 for property located at 6450 Corduroy Road for the purpose of having 4 horses and 20 chickens on the property in an R1 low-density residential zoning district.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wallensack.
Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 65 of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Wait a minute, Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wallensack.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
No.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
No.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 65, 2022 passes with 5 yeas and 2 nays. Next, council, is the next public hearing that we will open up here. I will open at 7:18 PM. And this will be for item 66, 2022, which involves new chapter 1145 for the Oregon Municipal Code titled Advanced Manufacturing District. And I will defer to Mr. Beasley for a quick rundown on this particular item.
Mr. President and members, thank you. I think a few folks were here. A lot of you are here for the appointments tonight. Those are coming up soon enough. But some folks were here for the some discussion on this. I just wanted to give a quick overview so folks understand. Yeah. So folks understand what we're looking at here. To emphasize, what we're doing today is creating a new zoning category for the city of Oregon. No property will be zoned advanced manufacturing once we accomplish this. It will just create a new tool that's available to the community should it want to create it. And obviously, we're taking this up because we believe that it's in our interest and we'll be seeking to do that going forward. But no property will be suddenly in this code. It just creates a new option that's available for us. The reason we're seeking this option is that heavy industrial development has been great for Oregon. We make most of Ohio's gasoline. We have 2 large refineries here. We have a power plant. We have a methanol plant. But we really think that we've had enough of the heaviest kind of development in Oregon, that we think it's been good for Oregon. We have lots of our residents work there, but we think we want to make sure that we have our lands available for the kind of development that we think there's a lot of demand for right now, some real interest in from companies looking for facilities that could fit well into Oregon. And so that, and under our current code, we have nothing we can do to exclude things like methanol plants or power plants in any of our industrial zoning categories. So we're looking to create a new category so that we can say we want to hold this out to be advanced manufacturing. And here's the real difference for what we're trying to do. And I'll kind of show, we looked around all over Ohio and suburban Detroit and Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids, Michigan, and really coming right in our area, the sort of thing that really is the most attractive kind of field that we're looking for is really right here in the Willys Overland Industrial Park area. Ed Harmon's team was involved in some of these buildings, who does development in Oregon. And if you look at like the Dana building here, you can see the difference between this and what we have in some of Oregon's industrial development. This advanced manufacturing will do a number of things. It will prohibit certain things like refineries and power plants and chemical facilities, but it will also require that the manufacturing buildings do some things to make themselves more attractive. They'll have more detailed landscaping rules, better parking restrictions, better lighting restrictions. We'll break up the mass of the buildings in kind of some interesting ways that is kind of best practice. So both vertically and horizontally. So if you look at this building, the rooftop HVAC units or other mechanicals are behind parapets. You have variegated roof line that makes it more attractive. You break it up with horizontal banding, vertical architectural features. But you can do a large building, but you have better lighting, landscaping, buffer, fencing, parking that matters and makes it blend in better and be a better neighbor in the community. So facilities like that, or even look, you can see the one just across the street, a similar feel. The rooftop has variegated roof line, break up the walls, both vertical and horizontally, better landscaping, more attractive parking, lighting, etc. So we're excited about what this does. It creates a tool that's available for the community that allows us to move forward and attract industrial facilities that can blend in well and really serve as a buffer between our heaviest industries and our residential and other commercial areas. So we would be looking to try and use this sort of zoning in the lands that the foundation has, the city owns that are between methanol plant in some of our neighborhoods, between the refineries in some of our neighborhoods, and make Oregon a more attractive place. And, but more importantly, position us a way to attract jobs for our future while we peacefully coexist with other uses in ways that we have not done well before. So we thought we needed a tool. We looked around and we developed this piece of legislation working with council over a period of, we talked about it for about 6 months as we worked on it. We worked with our internal team. We feel good about what it accomplishes. We know that, again, any zoning, there's no zoning bracket that's going to cover all situations. There could be time we create this and somebody's got to come in and either go and get relief through BZA or in other settings. But we think this sets a tone for us that says what Oregon wants to be moving forward in ways we have never done. We've always been that place that does heavy industry very well. We think we need to be the place that's attracting advanced manufacturing when there's real demand for this in this market right now. So we're excited about it. This is, again, the first step. After this, if council acts tonight, we would look to take some of the lands that the foundation has and seek to create this, move them into this zoning category. So this zoning category won't exist for any land in Oregon on 1 square foot until it goes through a next process with more public hearing and more reaction, et cetera. Anyone, we can't think of anyone who lives adjacent to currently to a lot of uses that wouldn't rather have this zoning category than the ones that we have available to us. Even our CI use, you can put a power plant in it. All right. Even in our, because it's indoors. All right. The methanol plant and those things have been great for Oregon. And we'll still have places for that, but we want to kind of screen them from our neighborhoods, screen them from our other commercial residential areas. We think it'll be good for Oregon and good for our future moving forward. So we've already, obviously, many of the council members have been immersed in it. We talked about it here, I think about 90 days ago when we first brought it up. Then we referred it to the Plan Commission, had a hearing there and discussion on it. Now it's back here and we're ready to act on it if council is. We do believe, again, this is a positive step because right now under Oregon's code, there's lots of things that we can't even say no to that we think we would be nice to say no to in some instances. Though we're interested in jobs, we think this legislation will allow us in some ways to have our cake and eat it too.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Is there anybody that wishes to speak in favor of item 66, 2022, or this item? Mr. Thompson, please state your name and your address, please, for the record.
Good evening, Gary Thompson, 2 Maritime Plaza, Toledo, Ohio, 43604.
Thank you.
is my work address. I work for the Regional Growth Partnership. My home address is 5808 Seaman Road, right up the street. It's not often that you hear brilliance in government said in the same sentence, but I want to commend the administration, administrative departments, and City Council of Oregon for looking at this tool and likely putting it in place. Not many communities have this tool in place, and it would set you apart from many communities in Ohio. And the great thing is, as Mr. Beasley said, you get to have your cake and eat it too, right? Once property is zoned under this designation, it tells the world that the community is open for this kind of development. However, it still retains control of that zoning with the city. All those site plans and building plans have to be approved by the city. So you don't have the free-for-all design that can occur in other forms of zoning. And I think this is something that will really help Oregon, Ohio attract the kind of jobs and investment that you're seeking for now and in the future. And there is high demand for this type of building structure in the automotive, in the food, in the logistics sectors of our economy. And that interest is in Northwest Ohio. So I commend you all for doing this, and I hope that you pass this very easily tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Is there anybody that wishes to speak in opposition? Hearing none, I will seek to close this hearing at 7.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak,
just wanted to ask if you were going to open it to questions or comments from the council.
go ahead.
Just wanted to, and really I'll kind of serve this up to Mr. Beasley as well, having been part of some of these discussions. The dialogue has been very positive within the business communities. There is a demand and a desire out there, which is one of the reasons why we look to do so. Mr. Beasley, can you kind of speak to some of the conversations that you've had with individuals considering building as well as that have already about this type of zoning?
Sure, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Thank you, council. We have companies interested in development in Northwest Ohio. And our concern as a community is that we think we have what those companies want. When we talk to them, they like that Oregon has water, sewer, electricity, natural gas, transportation assets, proximity to workforce, to really make it possible to come to work here. They are looking, many of these companies, to have an attractive setting that can look good like this and, you know, be a good brand and good statement for the enterprise and for the business. The concern for Oregon, though, as we look to attract these, that unless we take this step, we don't, for instance, maybe Mayor Mike starts a new business, he opens it up and then he sells it to someone else. And then we can't control what goes in there under our current code. This code will allow us to have control over what's there, its look and its feel, the lighting, the setbacks, all those things in a better way that gives, makes a better statement about what Oregon wants to be and what we want to show the world.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Beasley.
Mr.
Mr. President.
Mayor,
And there is one other aspect here is prior to this, if we wanted to have those limitations, we could do the same thing by having someone, just like we had applied for before, a special use exception permit. And what we're finding now with businesses, and Gary will tell you that from the Regional Growth Partnership is if we did that, they would have to wait and make a presentation for a product or for a business and then have the zoning change. We want to have zoning changes in place already when they come in because they are scared off by the process going through how it can have a real effect on the community versus they know what their status is prior to starting their application process. So that's what we've run into problem with before, with people not wanting to take that risk to put a lot into it, maybe sometimes millions of dollars, and then have a zoning change not go quite their way. So we have to have some of these things in place before they're here.
thank you, Mayor. Council, any other comments or questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake.
if a, this Mike's there, if a chemical plant, say if it was a toxic facility, because I see here on page 11, it kind of defines some of it. I don't see that on there, which is a good thing. So my question would be if the toxic place wanted to come in and make pollutants.
Mr. President, Mr. Chair, Mr. President.
Mr. Beasley?
Yes, this specifically bans chemical plants in its mix in this zoning territory, all right? It's specifically prohibited, and as one of those places that is, so we're not looking to attract, addition. Again, the refineries are great for Oregon. They're important partners, methanol plant, those things. But in this zoning territory, those things would not be welcome, and it's just specifically prohibited.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will seek to close the meeting. Are there any objections, council? I will close this public hearing at 7:32. And I will assign item 66, 2022 as ordinance 66, 22, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Amending Chapter 11 of the Planning and Zoning Code by establishing a new Chapter 1145 of the Oregon Municipal Code titled Advanced Manufacturing District and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 66 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you please take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 66, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Council, we need to open up another public hearing, and you've had all this information before you. It's also listed online regarding application for agricultural districts. And these will be items 66 through 72, 2022. I am going to open a public hearing for these items all together. And I will open this public hearing at 7:34. Is there anybody that wishes to speak in favor of any of these items 67 through 72? Is there anybody that wishes to oppose any of these items 67 through 72? Council, any comments or questions regarding any of these items? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing at 7:34. Council, do you have any objections? Public hearing is closed. Ms. Evans, I will assign item 67, 2022 as ordinance 67, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Approving inclusion of certain land situated in the city of Oregon, Ohio, owned by Corey A. and Michael D. Arbinger into an agricultural district for a 5-year period and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 67 of 2022 as an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 67, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item, I will assign item 68, 2022 as ordinance 68, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read into the record.
Approving inclusion of certain land situated in the city of Oregon, Ohio, owned by Charles W. and Jeanette M. Beeler into an agricultural district for a 5-year period and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 68 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, Thank you, council. Ordinance 68, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next, I will assign item 69, 2022 as ordinance 69, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Approving inclusion of certain land situated in the city of Oregon, Ohio, owned by Albert Rabel et al. Into an agricultural district for a 5-year period and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 69 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensteck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 69, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next, I will assign item 70, 2022 as ordinance 70, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Approving inclusion of certain land situated in the city of Oregon, Ohio, owned by Kenneth G. Romstead, trustee, into an agricultural district for a 5-year period and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 70 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensteck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 70, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next, I will assign item 71, 2022 as ordinance 71, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Approving inclusion of certain land situated in the city of Oregon, Ohio, owned by Kevin M. and Christy A. Rudy into an agricultural district for a 5-year period and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 71 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensteck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 71, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next, I will assign item 72, 2022 as ordinance 72, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read into the record.
Approving inclusion of certain land situated in the city of Oregon, Ohio, owned by Prakash S. Tondray into an agricultural district for a 5-year period and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 72 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensteck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 72, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. You wanna? Go on, run. We're gonna run the rest of the meeting? Yes. Okay, very good, okay. Okay, council, because we did not have a committee of the whole meeting last week, I will need a motion to add items 72 through 78, 2022 to this week's agenda.
Mr. President,
73 to 78, I'm sorry. Mr. Reeves?
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallensteck. Thank you, Mr. Wallensteck. Items 73 through 78 will be added to tonight's agenda. First up will be item 73, 2022. This is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Fire Chief Dennis Hartman, and I will go to the Fire Chief, Mr. Hartman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an ordinance for repairs that are bigger or manufacturer specific than can be handled locally. This is the vast majority of our the manufacturer of our truck is Pierce, which requires a Pierce a Pierce repair place to use. So this is just an ordinance in that we currently don't, well, I guess we do have one truck that's need repair, but we generally don't know exactly how much. This is generally these are pretty big repair bills. So we felt it was a good idea to get an ordinance to have the right to use this company.
Thank you, Chief. I did have a conversation with Chief Mullins regarding this because I was a little concerned that it didn't carry a figure with it that we might like have them on retainer for repairs, which apparently we don't need to do. But I don't know, is there a threshold of expense that has to be approved by council at all, or is this just Mr. Beasley?
It ultimately has to.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of the contract, we wanted to get this approved so they can go out and get that work done. Ultimately, it's got to be within the budget, and if it's outside of that, we'll come back and have to come with it and get some work relief from council of council's approval.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I just want to get this clear. This is more or less contracting with them, so we wouldn't go out and bid. They're the ones that are going to be fixing the Pierce apparatuses, correct?
Yes, I would say this is, it's like a sole provider, basically, for these particular fire engines, the Pierce fire engines. So it's not really a contract, it's just,
Yeah,
it's
so
an
like
allowance to them to use
warranty
that.
work,
Right.
manufacturer specific, like for a tower, for example, a tower ladder that needs new, pistons, you know, for the, to raise the bucket, et cetera. They have to be specific to that ladder. So, and somebody else can't do it. So, you know, it's basically a waste of time to try to get anybody to even bid it. If say we were just doing preventive maintenance and said, hey, we want to replace these cylinders, these pistons, nobody else will bid it. It's because it's manufacturer specific.
Gotcha, thank you.
Thank you, Chief Hartman. Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Council, any other questions or comments?
Mr. President.
Mr. Drake?
Yeah, I read this earlier today. I know 2 weeks ago, we approved an ordinance for American Enterprise. And after I looked into it deeper, this place in Findlay, it's my understanding they're the only place close to here that can work on them. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, yeah, for the manufacturer specific things such as pump, like here in American Enterprise, like if we need a valve fixed, an outside valve, he can do those kind of things. He can do oil changes, brake jobs, engine work. But when you have things like, as I can go back to that, he can't do the work on ladders and those kind of things because first off, he doesn't have the equipment for it. That's a very specific repair.
Okay.
So that's what we have to have. We actually have to have somebody in place. We've used these for years, but we're just trying to clean up for finance, that we can, because, we have a requirement for purchases that we have to have quotes or bids for all these things. And you'll never get one because the only thing we can do is go farther away. This is regional. They take care of, I think it's a 7-state area. So we'd have to go 7 states away or something like that to get somebody else. to
Okay, I
bid
just
it.
thought it said maintenance and ladder work. And then the one we passed 2 weeks ago said maintenance.
Right.
So you're saying pretty much anything that's warranty or something they're not able to do.
Right. And there's other things. And as you're well aware, there's so much electronics and those kind of things. And a lot of the electronic stuff is manufacturer specific that American Enterprise just simply doesn't have the equipment to take care of. And, they do a great job on what they can do, but you got to have specifics for something.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Thank you, Chief. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 73, 2022 as ordinance 73, 2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue purchase orders to Atlantic Emergency Solutions, Findlay Regional Service Center, 1120 Lima Avenue, Findlay, Ohio, to provide maintenance and repair services for fire engines and tower ladders.
Council,
Mr.
Ms.
President,
Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance number 73 of 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenzak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenzak. Ms. Evans, would you please take a vote of council, please?
Mrs. Pauloff,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck.
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 73, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item is item 74, 2022. This is also presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and City Administrator Michael J. Beasley. And I will defer to Mr. Beasley.
Mr. President, members, as the members note, the Oregon Municipal Court is a separate political subdivision, but under Ohio law, we're required to fund their operations. If we were, during our budgeting process, we did note that the court would be having to upgrade their purchase of licenses for Microsoft 365. They use that in the court. We do feel good about the price they received. It matches what we had in the budget, is competitive with that. And we're looking for, to pass this ordinance to move forward with that purchase for the court.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 74, 2022 as ordinance 74, 2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to DMC Technology Group Incorporated, 7657 Kings Point Road, Toledo, Ohio, for the purchase of Microsoft 365 Commerce license to be used for the city of Oregon and Oregon Municipal Court, and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff,
I move for passage of ordinance number 74 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 74, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item, 75, 2022 is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began, and I will defer to Chief Began.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first one up is for BP Husky Refinery. They're doing a large shutdown and retooling that's going to be going on through at least June. Requires multiple officers per day in the morning and evening for traffic control services. And this is reimbursement from a purchase order for reimbursement for those officers to be out there as a special detail.
Thank you, Chief. There's still reimburses for the use of the vehicles too, correct?
Correct, yeah, it's all rolled into one,
Thank you.
one rate that covers it.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 75, 2022 as ordinance 75, 2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to accept a purchase order from BP Husky Refining LLC to provide traffic control services to the Oregon Police Division under the terms listed and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Paula,
I move for passage of ordinance number 75 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
thank you, Ms. Paula.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Evans, you take a vote of council, please.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 75, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item, which is also being presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began, is item 76, 2022, and I will defer to Chief Began once again.
Thank you, Mr. President. This one is pretty much the same as with BP, but it's for the Toledo Refining Company. We have no set timeline to do any traffic control details with them, but this is a 3-year contract with wage increases over those 3 years to provide traffic control services and safety services in and around Toledo Refining.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 76, 2022 as ordinance 76, 2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and chief of police to enter into an amended agreement with the Toledo Refining Company LLC to provide traffic control services to the Oregon Police Division under the terms listed on an as-needed basis and reimbursed in declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 76 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mrs. Polloff?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 76, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item, 77, 2022 is also presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began. And I will defer to Chief Began.
Thank you, Mr. President. When we lost our dispatch or when the dispatch services moved down to the COG and dispatch vacated the current room that they were in, that leaves us with some open space to rework and add, move over the records section to a bigger area to accommodate for them, and redo the old records department section to make it more usable space for us. So this contract, we got 3 different quotes, much higher. The lowest one that we're very happy with, $49,500 with Lakeside Interior Contractors. We just want to get this space more usable for what we need, and that's what this is for.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments?
Mr. President.
Mr. Horniak.
If I could, Chief Began, speaking to the adjustment, obviously, we did appropriate funding for this in the budget, and it seems that it's considerably higher. Now, I'm in that field, so I understand where prices are going with just about everything right now. Did the scope of work change, or what our intentions or our plans on the renovation to that space alter in any method?
It did not. The original quote that we got was for over $200,000 for the same type of repairs. Let me pull that up. That was a Bureau group, ranged from 2,000 or 200,000 to 240,000 with an additional cost of 16,000 for architect and engineering design. So when we went through the budget process last year, that's the only number that we had. We knew that we'd be able to do it cheaper, or we would have to accommodate and do less with the space. When we went with Lakeside and got other quotes from other companies, Lakeside came in at the best for something very similar to what we wanted to do in that original quote. So that's why there's a price difference with it. We're a fourth or a fifth of what we were originally quoted from that first group.
Okay. And there is somewhat 2 pieces of this, because there's an add-on that needs to be done by somebody else, specific to equipment upgrades.
Correct.
I'll speak
So
loosely on that.
APC, or Asset Protection Company, they do all the key card access and the security doors throughout the entire city or municipal complex. And with this new addition, because our records department is moving over and just some changes with that, we have to update some of the security key carding into those. And as well as our leads access, we have to have a certain security protocol within the police department because of certain law enforcement databases that we have. So some of the doors that are up there and one other additional door that leads directly into our police department that we needed to update to make sure we're in compliance.
Fair enough. One final question, if I may, Mr. President, probably for the administration
Go
on
ahead.
this. So since there is an add-on to the appropriation needed, have we determined where the appropriation is coming from?
Mr. President, ultimately from 101.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 77, 2022 as ordinance 77, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to Lakeside Interior Contractors 26970 Echo Road, Perrysburg, Ohio, for the renovation of the Records and Former Dispatch Center in the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallensack.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 77 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, please take a vote of council, please.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Council, ordinance 77, 2022.
Sorry.
Yes,
Thank you, Ms. Paulo.
sorry about that.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Ordinance 77, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item will be 78, 2022, which is also presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Chief Brandon Began. And I will once again defer to Chief Began on this item.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Oregon Police Division, because we work closely with multiple other agencies in and around Lucas County. Under the Ohio Revised Code, we're authorized to enter into contracts with agencies that we work nearby for an indefinite period for additional police protection in an emergency situation. The city of Oregon is currently in a mutual aid agreement with multiple agencies in and around the area that we've been in since 2011, and most likely before that. That's the last one that we're operating under at this point. Because of changes to departments, department heads in the area, the Metro Toledo Criminal Justice Administrators group thought that it was pertinent to update the mutual aid agreement to add in and change some of the organizations that are within there. And most of those departments have new agency heads as well. So they wanted to get an updated mutual aid agreement together. So that's what this is. We're currently operating under the one that was signed in 2011. This is just to update that agreement.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments?
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I noticed in the list that Jerusalem Township is not in this. Is that correct or,
Mr. President.
Sheriff.
pardon me,
That would be for the
Only
sheriff.
communities with police departments.
police chiefs? Okay. Because I know that there was a question about what was going on with them through Lucas County, so I
Yeah,
thought that
Mr. President, I can answer that. So Jerusalem Township, we had some discussions because the Lucas County Sheriff's Department provides emergency services and road patrol out there currently. And we had talked about this before. In 2023, the Lucas County Sheriff's Office stated that if they want to continue road patrol services out there, that Jerusalem Township and all the other townships that are not paying for police services are going to have to start paying a certain amount for that, or they could look to other agencies to fulfill that. And so Jerusalem Township is only patrolled by Lucas County Sheriff's Office, but that may be changing. We're not sure what agency they're going to go with, if they're going to stick with Lucas County or go with Ottawa County, or what they're going to do. But that's why Jerusalem Township would not be on this, because they don't have their own police department or police agency out there.
thank you for that.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Council, any other questions or comments?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake.
it does say on here Lucas County Sheriff's Office.
Yes.
So would that involve the sheriff's department or? Sure.
Yeah.
Sheriff runs the county, right? So they would be allowed to do it
Just not with the Jerusalem Township, with the county.
through the county.
Correct.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 78, 2022 as ordinance 78, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and chief of police to enter into a mutual aid agreement on behalf of the city of Oregon and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 78 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallensack. Thank you, Mr. Wallensack. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mrs. Pavlov?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake? Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 78, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Council, this ends our agenda items for this week's meeting, and I will now move over to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. And council, you see before you, I have quite a few appointment letters that you received prior to tonight's meeting. We're going to pick out like a couple of them and appoint those, and sometime in July, we'll appoint the rest. I'm just kidding. All right, I will start with the police department. And as you'll see on these police appointment letters, it shows their annual rate and their their hourly rate. And you'll see one of them is different than the other because one is appointed in April 11th and the others are after July 1st when our pay range has increased contractually by 2 3/4%. So that's why you see the difference there. And just for the rest of you who will be appointed prior to July, you'll still get that 2 3/4% raise July 1st. But I will start with the police department once again, and I would ask council's concurrence in the appointment to police officer of Gabriela Carlin. And she is from, I always do this and leave my glasses at home. Yes, council's concurrence in the appointment of Gabriela Carlin to the police officer effective date April 11th, 2022, to be placed at step 1 of the OPPA pay range 60,257.60, which is an hourly rate of $28.97 prior to July 1st. And once again, he has council's concurrence in the appointment of Gabriela April 11th.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of Gabriela Carlin as police officer with a start date of April 11th, 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallensack. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the appointment of Gabriela Carlin as a police officer for the Oregon Police Department. Is Gabriela here?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, council. She is not here. She's in the academy and she was unable to attend tonight. So I will then go to appointment to police officer also of Austin Martican. And that appointment will be August 8th, 2022. And he's placed at step 1 of the OBPA pay range, annual salary, $61,921.60, which is an annual rate of $29.77. And once again, I ask for council's concurrence with an effective date, August 8th, 2022, Austin Martican.
Council,
Mr.
Ms.
President,
Pauloff.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of Austin Martican. Are we saying that correctly?
Thank you, Ms.
Is that
Pauloff.
are we saying that correctly? Martican? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll correct you, to
Austin?
Martican.
Austin Martican to police officer whose starting date is August 8th, 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Second by Mr. Wallensack. Thank you, Mr. Wallensack. Council, any objections? Hearing none. Mayor, council does concur with the appointment of Austin Martican as a police officer for the Oregon Police Department. Austin, are you here? You're more than welcome to say a couple words if you like.
Well, wait a minute, we'll have you come up after each of everybody's up, all right?
You can just hang loose.
Just get over with. Huh?
Think of your speech.
No. Council, next is for appointment to police officer Grant Rosbert. Effective date, August 8th, 2022. Once again, step 1, 61/9/21/60, 2977. And I ask council's concurrence in the appointment to Grant Rosbert to police officer, August 8th, 2022.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Paulo.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of police officer Grant Rosbert, whose starting date is August 8th, 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the appointment of Grant Rosbert
And
as a police officer for the Oregon Police.
Okay, and thank you, council. Thank you, Mr. President. And last, from the police department, I'd ask council's concurrence, the appointment to police officer of Evan Sandwich, August 8th, 2022, step 1, 61/9/21/60, annual, or that's the annual rate, and hourly rate is $29.77. Once again, I ask council's concurrence, August 8th, Evan Sandwich.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Paulo.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of police officer Evan Sandwich, whose start date is August 8th, 2022.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak, or is that Mr. Drake?
Drake.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any objections? Hearing no objections, Mayor, council does concur with the appointment of Evan Sandwich as a police officer for the Oregon Police Division.
Okay. Go ahead.
Evan, you want to stand so we can see who you are?
Yeah.
And Grant, where are you at? Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and now when we're going to switch over to the wastewater treatment plant, and I'd ask council's concurrence to the appointment of Mr. Scott Konwinski to the position of wastewater treatment operator, effective date April 11th, 2022. To be placed at step 1 of the ASME pay range, which is an hourly rate of $29.55 or an annual rate of $61,464. It's council's concurrence, once again, Scott Konwinski, April 11th, 2022.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I would like to concur with the mayor for the appointment of Mr. Scott Kowalski for the wastewater treatment operator effective April 11th of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Paulo. Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the hiring of Scott Konwinski.
Okay, next, council, and this was from the Department of, let's see, yeah. Oh, for the Water Distribution Department. And I would ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Nick Bale to the position of maintenance worker, placed at step 1, ASME pay range $27.73, which is an annual rate is $57,678.40. Effective startup date is April 11th, 2022. And once again, I ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Mr. Nick Bale, April 11th, 2022.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move to concur with the mayor of the appointment of Nick Vale. I don't have his paperwork, so what day is it?
April 11th.
April 11th.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Council, any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the appointment of Mr. Nicholas Vale.
Okay, next in the Streets Department, I'd ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Mr. Aaron Frankie to the position of maintenance worker, with the effective startup date of April 25th, 2022. Placed step one, ask me pay range 2773, 57, 678, 40. Once again, ask council's concurrence to the appointment. Aaron Frankie, effective date April 25th, 2022.
Thank you. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake,
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment, Mr. Aaron Frankie, effective April 25th, 2022.
thank you, Mr. Drake.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walzak. Thank you, Mr. Walzak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the appointment of Mr. Aaron Frankie.
Next, to the Department of Public Service, in the Engineering Department, to the position of Engineer 1, I'd ask council's concurrence to the appointment of Mr. Vincent Zabo to be placed in the PSTE pay range, step 3, 33.30 an hour, 69,261.40, and this effective startup date would be May 16th, 2022. Once again, Nick Zabo, Engineer 1.
Thank you. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish,
I move to concur with the mayor of the appointment of Mr. Vincent Sabo, position of engineer effective May 16, 2022.
thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Paulo. Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, Mayor, council does concur with the appointment of Mr. Vincent Sabo.
Okay, council, and the next, these are seasonal appointments, and I will name all 4 of these individuals, and they will all have a startup date of March 29th, 2022. First, utility worker 1, Grace Claus, step 5, 1675 an hour. Utility worker 2, David Wiegand, class 5, step 2, $19 an hour. Dave Shute of classification 5, step 2, $19 an hour. And James, is it Gory? A step 2, $19 an hour. Once again, their startup date would be effective tomorrow, March 29th, 2022. And I'd ask council's concurrence in the appointment of these 4 individuals that I just named.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish,
I would like to concur with the mayor of the appointment of seasonal help of utility worker 1, Grace Claus, utility worker 2, David Wiegand, David Schulte, James Gurry, effective March 29, 2022.
thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the 4 appointments for the street division for cemeteries and street department.
Okay, and next in the division of water distribution, and ask council's concurrence to the appointment of Mr. Garrett Anderson to be placed at utility worker 2, classification 5, step 1 of the seasonal pay scale of $18.75 an hour. And the effective startup date is also tomorrow, March 29th, 2022. And I'd ask council's concurrence once again of that of Mr. Garrett Anderson, utility worker 2.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish,
I would like to concur with the mayor of the appointment of Mr. Gary Anderson, effective March 29, 2022.
thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Paulo. Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the reappointment of Mr. Garrett Anderson.
Okay, and we will be going for another reappointment, and that would be of Mr. Dempsey Coughlin to utility worker 2 at the wastewater treatment plant, classification 5, step 1, seasonal pay range, $18.75 an hour. And you also have a startup dated tomorrow, March 29th, 2022. Again, Mr. Dempsey Coughlin, and I ask council's concurrence in that appointment, reappointment.
Thank you. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I'd like to concur with the mayor of the reappointment of Mr. Dempsey Coughlin, effective March 29, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Paulo. Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the reappointment of Mr. Dempsey Coughlin.
Now we're redoing things, council. You, prior to today, you accepted the retirement resignation of James Rose from the fire department, full-time fire. That would have been effective April 29th. He's found a way to retire a little earlier than that, and we're going to allow him to retire April 1st, 2022. And there's council's concurrence in the retirement resignation of Mr. James Rose, effective April 1st, 2022.
Council,
Mr. President.
Ms. Paulo.
I move to concur with the mayor's acceptance of the retirement date of James Rowe firefighter to April 1st, 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walczak. Thank you, Mr. Walczak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the acceptance of the earlier retirement for James Rose.
Okay, thank you, council. Thank you, Mr. President. Now that we have all that out of the way, we do have some of the people that were appointed here today. Austin, if there's anything you'd like to say, if you're here, you can come back up now. We'll give you like 15, 20 minutes.
I just wanted to say thank you guys for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Welcome, good luck.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Thank you.
required to do at least 10 minutes. And, these are good. Yeah,
I can't help you. I don't have any glasses.
Grant.
Grant, all right, yeah, Grant.
Congratulations. Grant.
Evan, you gotta have a little. No, Evan, he's gotta have a little.
Thank you.
Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
Aaron, you're up. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Nick back there somewhere. Okay, good deal.
Congratulations.
Anybody else here?
Scott?
Oh. Okay. I think the rest are seasonal.
We should note for the record that really the best news is that you almost never have to sit through a council meeting in the future. It's a rare occurrence unless
Yeah,
you make
hopefully
the
not.
mistake that Paul did.
Mayor, you complete?
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Mr. Beasley.
Can I have my glasses back? So, yeah, we usually have an extra pair in the drawer, but we lent those out. as Old people, you know. Just a note, and this is something we've talked about before. We've kicked around. We're going to be making some inquiry with ODOT, and it's aesthetics, and you know nobody wants to own aesthetics, but really notice, you know, for a while we were getting pushback from ODOT on kind of a statement saying, you know, here's Oregon, that's running along 280. I've noticed that some other communities around have really done some things to really kind of, you know, some of the townships and some other cities have really done some things along the interstate to really kind of say, hey, here we are. We're going to look into that again and see if we can do a thing to really kind of let folks know they're in Oregon. We got pushback before there. I think that pushback's gone. We'll have to actually budget for it, but there's something that we'll take a look at. We just want to let council know we're going to look at that again. All right.
Thank you,
We're
Mr.
doing-
Beasley.
And I did I promised to make this commercial announcement. A couple of our residents have called about some pet owners failing to clean up after their dogs. We just want to make it, it's probably not the most important issue, but if it's in your yard, it becomes an important issue. We're going to make a reminder to our residents that their responsibility to take care of what is left behind by our pets. makes it a better place to live, and you don't have to watch where you step as often. So that's all I had to do tonight. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Ms. Purpura.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Mr. Roman.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenzak.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzak. Mr. Davish.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Horniak.
I'll let you go 7 for 7. No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. I have no report for my standing committee. However, one thing I just want to bring up, and this was, I guess this came out of the news a little bit, just to, if council isn't aware, we have talked earlier a little bit about starting a community garden, and some of that was actually in the Blade, which it's in the very infant stage. We're nowhere near doing something like this, hopefully for maybe next year. And Mr. Roman, if you care to comment, that's okay. If you don't, that's fine. But I just want to make council aware that it's something we're discussing, but it's in the very broad sense of the terms right now. I think it's a great idea, but you know.
Yeah, and Mr. President, and again, I had a resident reach out to us, and you know, they bring a lot of examples in the city of Perrysburg, and everyone has a different meaning. Community gardens, is it something the city does, or the schools, or Perrysburg, you can actually rent plots within this community garden. But yeah, I think we need time to properly plan it out, and where would you put it? I think just in thinking in general, thinking out on the city complex, it can be watched over easier. And I think it's just a matter of planning a location for it this year and working through the details. And then in future years, you then do it, you know. But I think it's something we need to, we're doing the wetlands project out back, and there's a lot of farmland that surrounds that. Could you do it right outside of it? We thought on the south side of the complex by the soccer fields, there's parking there, but there's no water source. So we'd probably have to extend a water line and things like that. So again, there's planning that's involved, but I think also when you're doing anything out back, I think we need to think about it. And if there's ever a committee meeting or something like that you want to have more later on, it'd be worth doing. It was hard for me because in a lot of other cities, it's under recreation, and it's not, you know, I think for here it's new. And the question is what committee would even handle it, let alone which department and planning. So I tried to share with council, let you be aware of it, and really seek your input first. And then the idea would be to, you know, start thinking more, put details together, and see what the community interest is. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Also, the work that we're doing right now on the dog park that we've been discussing, that will move along more this week. And that seems to be going very, very well. And we'll have more to report on that, I think, very soon. The next thing, council, what I need to do is we need to set a public hearing for Monday, April 11th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And this will be for 4 applications for renewal for agricultural districts. Number 1 will be a renewal application for agricultural district for Walter T. and Yvonne DuPont for 6 acres located at 66 or 6733 Seaman Road. The second is a renewal application for an agricultural district for Glenn E. Ackerman for 16.5926 acres located at 6449 Navarre, 19.504 acres located at 6425 Navarre, 20.93 acres located at 1262 Bury Road, 5.438 acres located at 1302 Bury Road, 40 acres located at 6559 Corduroy Road, and 48.4 acres located at 6715 Corduroy Road. The third is a renewal application for an agricultural district for Jeffrey S. Martin et al. For 6 acres located at 6715 15 Seaman Road. And the fourth is a renewal application for an agricultural district for Daniel J. and Judith A. Lighty as trustees for 19.503 acres located at 6353 Navarre Avenue. Council, can I get a motion to set this public hearing for April 11th?
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move to hold the public hearing as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, these public hearings for these four items will be set for Monday, April 11th, 2022. Council, we have nobody signed in as delegations or anybody for comments. Therefore, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Ms. Pauloff. Meeting is adjourned. Excuse me.
Welcome aboard, folks. Good to have you. You won't have to sit through these meetings.
Oh.
Telling me.
Oh.